Well, I've told you for months that electricity prices and the mishandling of climate and energy policies will be the Achilles heel for the Albanese Labor government. And as we predicted, the main takeout from the budget was always going to be the power price pain ahead and what it'll do to Australians and to our economy. Too many inside the Canberra political bubble didn't want to see this because most of them are all on board with the net zero virtue signalling. Too many have sipped on that Kool-Aid. And by the way, too many in the political media class don't have to worry too much about their electricity bills either. But most voters do. And 2 days on, the mainstream concerns, mainstream assessments are dominating budget reactions. You can't hold back reality for very long. Have a look at these headlines. The front page of the Adelaide Advertiser, electric shock, it screams. And it writes about what it calls the human faces of Albo's broken power bill promise. Sydney's Daily Telegraph talks about Jim Chalmers' blackout, looking at pain for small business. And Melbourne's Herald Sun sums up the broken promise and bungling with Dim Jim. The Courier Mail in Queensland also highlights Chalmers' bungling backflip over power bills. And even in the Green Left, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, they couldn't avoid focusing on the soaring electricity prices or the broken Labor promise about reducing costs. Yeah, this stuff will be murder for the country and kryptonite for Labor. Have a look at the TV news.
On Power Street Doonside, the rising cost of energy might mean they'll have to go without it.
Well, I think you have to start turning things off.
For the local childcare centre, the budget had good and bad news. A subsidy boost for parents, but a nightmare for its electricity and gas bills.
And see where we can cut costs if we can. At the end of the day, our air conditions are always on to provide that comfort for the children. But in saying that, you know, what do we do?
Nearby, student Kunek already struggles with rent, now it's power.
50 or 40% increase in the price. I don't think a normal citizen can afford this.
We should be exploring every option or else businesses like this will be closed. They won't be sustainable and then people will have a shortage of food.
Yeah, the less you earn, the more pain you'll feel. Pensioners will be badly hurt and small businesses squeezed. But while most media did what you'd expect, they talked to those who'll suffer, as you just saw there. Over at the ABC, at the taxpayer-funded ABC, they invited on a billionaire climate activist and power company investor.
The man you're about to hear from, software billionaire and clean energy investor Mike Cannon-Brookes, argues it's more evidence of the need for Australia to speed up its transition to renewables. Mike Cannon-Brookes, welcome to breakfast.
Hi, Pico. How are you doing?
All very chummy, aren't they? Cannon-Brookes, of course, will make even more money from the high power prices. And as usual for the ABC, the climate activist wasn't challenged on his claims, as he tried to blame all of Australia's energy price and supply shambles on higher fossil fuel prices thanks to the Ukraine war.
We know that states with the highest renewable penetration have, again, the lowest power prices and the least increases. So at the fundamentals of it, it's a fossil fuel pricing challenge.
Well, apart from missing the point about how we've upended our power grid by favouring renewables and pushing out huge chunks of coal and gas generation, Cannon-Brookes' claim was just plain wrong. He said the states with the highest renewables penetration had the lowest power prices. That was a straightforward claim, and let's fact check him. As this table from the Clean Energy Council shows, Tasmania, of course, tops the renewables list with all of its hydro. And then comes South Australia, that's led the charge on wind power for a 60% renewable share. OK, South Australia and Tasmania, national leaders on renewables, how do they perform on cost? This graphic from the National Electricity Market Commission shows Tasmania as the most expensive bills, at about $2,000 a year. South Australia has the second highest at $1,700 a year, and the coal-burning states of Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland are all significantly cheaper at around $1,200 a year. So the reality, the facts, are the opposite to what the billionaire climate activist claimed. It's confirmed by other sources too. This consumer comparison site has tighter numbers, but still has Tasmania and South Australia as the most expensive states. And these numbers are all publicly available. Get to it over at the ABC, check it all out. And they would only be higher now, of course, rising 20% this year and at least 30% to go next year. We're paying the price for a reckless renewable energy push that's already cost upwards of $60 billion and is going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars more. For instance, Labor has announced $20 billion of government funding for transmission projects. It might work with another $100 billion or more of private capital as well to build transmission lines right across the country to link up renewable energy projects. These are regulated assets. In other words, they get to charge enough to make a guaranteed profit. So all the costs are passed on to consumers. We will all pay for these investments. And as for those renewable energy projects that they're going to link up, Labor says we'll need 40 of these massive wind turbines every month for the next 8 years. That's more than one turbine a day for 8 years. Keep an eye on your backyard, hey? And they reckon we need to install 22,000 solar panels every day. 22,000 solar panels a day for 8 years. And we all have to pay for it. It all goes onto our electricity bills. And they have the audacity to blame all this shambles and the costs on the war in Ukraine. The thing is, of course, that even with all this spending, renewable energy is intermittent. Batteries can't store enough power at a workable price, so when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, whatever gas or coal generation is left can charge whatever it likes. That's the problem. That's what Labor and earlier coalition governments have done. And that's why it's only going to get worse. Look at Europe, look at South Australia, look at California. Yeah, and yet, with all this playing out, all we get from the Prime Minister when he's asked about his broken promise on power prices is this.
I reject the premise of the question because it goes to a failure still for those opposite to actually recognise that renewable energy is the cheapest form of new energy.
All the evidence to the contrary, as I've just explained. As I keep saying, these climate and energy policies will cripple the country and destroy this Labor government, which is why we need to focus on the coalition and make sure they come up with a proper alternative backing reliable power, a challenge they squibbed at the last election. Let's see what Peter Dutton says in his budget reply tonight.